You asked, you received. Part 2, baby! Let's go! I'm so glad that my last video got the support that it did. I didn't expect you guys to be so interested in my Genshin Impact OCs, which is why I am presenting part 2 of this series, where I'll be going over the other 7 OCs that I have created. Without further ado, let's get on with the video. Also, another side note, I may or may not have based all of these next couple of OCs off of Pokemon. Okay, scratch that. They were all based off of Pokemon. I'll be sure to tell you which Pokemon I based the OCs off of as the video progresses. The first OC I'll be covering in this video is Aura, who is based off of the Pokemon Zeraora. Aura is an electrocatalyst user from Mondstadt and is the adopted younger sister of Razor. I feel like there are a lot of differences between Razor and Aura in the sense of how the wolves raised them. While Razor was found as a newborn child, Aura was found when she was around 3 years old and orphaned. This means that Aura has a slightly stronger vocabulary than Razor, but due to exposure to the language of the wolves, has a bit of a broken tongue. By which I mean she doesn't communicate her thoughts and feelings very well like most other people. Something else about the way Aura talks is that she speaks in the third person, kind of like Paimon. Before I tell you one of my favorite voice lines I made for Aura, I feel I should let you know that she has quite a few fears. She's afraid of water, the cold, the dark, and loud noises. The reason why I mention this is because one of Aura's voice lines has her talking about Kaya. In this voice line she says, "Kaya is cold. Aura hates the cold." Well, he does have a cryovision, so it's no wonder he's cold. My next OC that I'll be covering is named Lucy, who is based off of Lucario. She's an Anemo Polearm user, and her real name is actually Carius, the Jackal Spirit of Loyalty. You're probably wondering what the heck I'm talking about, so let me explain. The lore behind her backstory is that Lucy started out as a normal desert jackal, but was killed by humans while displaying a strong sense of loyalty towards her pack. It's because of this that she is made an animal spirit and is promised a new life as a human servant, should one come about. Enter Tighnari. While Tighnari was on a forest patrol with his friend, they encountered a wild tiger that threatened to end their lives. Tighnari's friend begged him to leave and get help, but he refused, saying that he was loyal to his friend. This caused Lucy in her new human form to appear and rescue Tighnari and his friend before she dedicates her life to becoming Tighnari's servant. One of my favorite voice lines I made for Lucy is when she's talking about Dea. I've heard of that name before. Flamemane is her given warrior name, right? I wonder if she's an animal spirit just like me. Look, just because someone is given a nickname based off of an animal doesn't make them an animal spirit, Lucy. My next OC is named Farnell, who is based off of Galarian Farfetch'd. Remember in my last video how I said that Pinto's backstory was confusing? Well, Farnell's is a lot worse. Basically, he was born a deaf mute in the nation of Snezhnaya, but before his parents died, he was given the ability to understand animals. Already the story gets confusing. How did his parents magically give him the ability to understand animals? Animals are the only thing he can hear, not humans. I will say this does come in handy since he has a pet duck named Flappy. More on that later. Actually, screw it. Flappy acts as Farnell's quote-unquote human translator. Anyway, after Farnell is orphaned, he and Flappy leave their home and travel for a long time. One Dendrovision later, and he arrives in Liyue, where he meets Yanfei and now acts as her legal assistant. As someone unable to talk, Farnell doesn't have any voice lines. However, one of my previously mentioned OCs in my last video does. One of Katie's voice lines has her talking about Farnell. I first met the deaf mute when he came with Yanfei for a visit. His pet ducks seemed to get along with Bibi and Tolta, and he didn't seem to mind that I was blind. I hope he visits again sometime. Now, for those of you who don't like to read about character lore in their free time like I do, the reason why this voice line matches canon Genshin Impact lore is because in Kuki Shinobu's lore, she had left Inazuma for a time to study the law and met Yanfei in Liyue. I hope that clears some things up for you. Next up is Atlas, whose character design was inspired a lot by Primarina. She is a hydropolar mover who, like Lucy, isn't technically human. Unlike Lucy, Atlas isn't an animal spirit. Instead, she is the daughter of a monster. Which monster, you ask? The Oceanid. Atlas was created from one of the Oceanid's water illusions, but as a human, she realized that the Oceanid was a monster and ran away. Fast forward a few years, and news is spreading across Teyvat about a string of murder cases taking place in Fontaine. Enter Haijo, who travels to Fontaine to investigate. It's during his investigation that he meets Atlas, who was the man, or woman in this case, behind the slaughter, as she was under the influence of an Abyss Mage. Once the Abyss Mage is defeated, Atlas comes to her senses and shows deep regret for her actions. Haijo forgives her and allows her to return to Inazuma with him, where she decides to become a detective to atone for her past mistakes. Now, when I first made Atlas, I shared her voice lines with a close friend of mine, and this one voice line in particular made shivers run down her spine. This voice line is triggered when you make Atlas reach Ascension Phase 4. If you feared my strength, you wouldn't continue to make me stronger. Yeah, I'm starting to see why that particular voice line freaked her out. Moving on, my next OC is named Honroar, and his inspiration came from two Pokemon, Honedge and Pyroar. Get it? Honedge? Pyroar? Oh, I cracked myself up. Anyways, Honroar is a pyro sword user who was born in Sumeru but moved to Liyue and now works as a consultant for Wangsheng Funeral Parlor under Hu Tao's directory. Why did he move to Liyue? Well, this is where things get weird. I actually failed to mention this before, but Honroar did have an older brother named Hun Li. Honroar and Hun Li were best friends, always looking out for each other. One day, Hun Li left Sumeru to visit his friend in a different nation, and never returned. The only thing that came home was his blood-stained sword. Fast forward to when Honroar turned 16 years old, and he hears his brother's voice inside of his sword. It's later revealed that Hun Li's spirit possessed the sword and placed a curse on it, so that only Honroar could be the sole wielder. Honroar is then instructed by Hun Li's spirit to go to Liyue, where someone will give him work there. This is how Honroar meets Hu Tao and begins working for her. My favorite voice line that I made for Honroar is when he's talking about Chi-Chi. I honestly don't know what Hu Tao's deal with Chi-Chi is. I mean, I get that she's a zombie, but shouldn't we let her live her life again before we decide when her time is up? Zombies have feelings too, right? Yes, they do, Honroar. Yes, they do. Next up is Stoner, whose inspiration came from the Pokemon Garchomp. He's a Geo-Bow user who was born in Liyue but moved to Mondstadt before landing himself a job as a bartender at the Cat's Tail Tavern alongside Diona. Why did he move to Mondstadt, you ask? Well, his backstory is kind of sad. When Stoner was born, his parents didn't want him, so they attempted to end his life by throwing him into the harbor and drowning him. Cloud Retainer saw this and thought, I'ma save this dude. So she dove into the harbor and rescued Stoner before he could drown. She then decided to raise Stoner as her own child, kind of like what she did with Shenhe and Ganyu. However, unlike Shenhe and Ganyu, Stoner imprinted on Cloud Retainer and grew up believing that he is an Adeptus. This belief grows stronger as Stoner grows up, and even after he earns his Geovision, he says that it's all part of his Adepti powers. Eventually, Stoner decided that he wanted to, quote-unquote, experience life as a mortal, so he leaves Liyue and moves to Mondstadt, where he meets Diona and finds work at the Cat's Tail Tavern. My favorite voice line from Stoner is when he's introducing himself. I am the great Adeptus Stoner, master of Geo, wielder of the bow, son of the one and only Cloud Retainer. Wait, you've never heard of me? You're missing out. Yeah, I think the reason why we've never heard of you is because you're not a real Adeptus. The last OC I have for you guys is named Simon, who is inspired by Weavile. And in all honesty, I think his backstory is the weirdest out of all of the other OCs I have. The reason why I say this is because, well, Simon was born with his cryovision. Yeah, I know. It's not possible for people to be born with visions, which is why I say that his backstory is the weirdest. I mean, he was born in Natlan, of all places, and that's the last place you'd expect someone to be born with a cryovision. However, being born with a vision is a perfect excuse for the Fatui to kidnap you and perform 12 years of experiments on you, which is exactly what happened to Simon. One cool explosion later, and Simon manages to barely escape the clutches of the Fatui and take a teleport waypoint to Mondstadt, where he's nursed back to health by Diluc. Once Simon is better, he's allowed to work at the Angel Share Tavern with Diluc, and this is where he meets Eula and learns about the Knights of Favonia's reconnaissance company. Diluc tries to warn Simon about the Knights, but Simon ignores him and decides to join Eula. A voice line that I've always liked with Simon is when he's telling us more about himself. Once, after I finished visiting Diluc, I saw Eula playing her bone whistle next to a mist flower. I asked her if she thought my vision was a blessing or a curse, and she told me, if you thought it was a curse, you wouldn't use it, but if you thought it was a blessing, you wouldn't be ashamed to have it. That's stuck with me ever since. Wise words, Eula. Anyways, thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, great! Like I said in my previous video, I'm always open to theories you may have about my characters. You can write your theories in the comments. Also, feel free to comment on which of my OCs you really liked. I'm thinking about making another video like this where I talk about my OCs from other fandoms that I've joined, such as the Dream SMP or My Hero Academia. Stay tuned for those videos. With that being said, I'll see you guys around the next corner. So long, my peeps!